Welcome everybody to another wonderful, fantastic, unbelievably exciting Leadership Factory. I am really excited. We've been doing these Leadership Factories now for about 8-9 months, and today I believe we have the most important one up to date. And when you see the guest that Orrin Woodward brought on, and you see the subject line, and you see how the impact it will have on the world, I believe you'll all agree. Now with that, for those of you that are joining us that are new to the Leadership Factory, this is a project that came about due to my friend Doug Fireball and Paul Saunders, the founders of the Home Business Radio Network. I went to Orrin, and Orrin, what he does is he's a leadership guru. As a matter of fact, he's in the top 100, top 25, actually in the top 10, and pretty soon up close to 1 and 2, I think, Orrin, in the world as a Leadership Factory guru. His blogs are unbelievable. The knowledge, the impact, the information that's shared. Top 100 rated in the world in H&R management and business. He holds 4 patents. I believe he's one of the best communicators in the direct selling profession, actually in the world today, and he continues to grow and grow and more. And so with all that being said, I want to turn it over to my friend and the host, the anchor of the Leadership Factory, Mr. Orrin Woodward.
Thank you, Tony. You know, I'm really excited for today. I asked Oliver DeMille to come on the show, and just a little background. Oliver wrote a couple top-selling books, but my favorite is Thomas Jefferson Education. In fact, before I knew Oliver, I knew his books. A good friend of mine had told me, "You've got to read this book," and so he handed it to me, and I flipped through it, and I said, "Yeah, I might read it." And on the plane ride home, I happened to just open. I said, "Well, I'll just read the intro," and I read the intro, and that led me to the first chapter. And a couple hours later, I'm finished with the book, and I'm like, "Who is this Oliver DeMille? Like, where does this guy come from, and who thinks like this?" And it just the whole concept of you've got to be passionate about education and not a leadership, not a factory type model, but a leadership model. In fact, a leadership factory model. And I just loved it. In fact, I said, I got to get to know this guy. And Oliver was going through some massive health challenges at the time. And so when I first reached out, I thought, well, maybe he just doesn't want to get to know anybody, And then I found out, boy, he was really seriously going through some health challenges. But thankfully, he is healing up, and his brain just works. He reads thousands of books. And I know he reads them because when we talk, I ask him a question on this, and he refers back to it. So he's one of the most knowledgeable, hungriest students that I've ever met. And so when getting a chance to write our book here, Leadership, together, is just been a total joy. And when I heard that it made the New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestseller list, all this other good stuff, I'm like, well, fantastic. And this book would not have come together were it not for Oliver. He took some boring concepts. I always say that if I would have just wrote up a proposal on government that I had, I think I would have had 10 people really enjoy it and everybody else say, huh? What the heck? What is that? So Oliver took these concepts and he weaved it into a story that is a fable. And I don't want to share anymore because I want to turn it over to Oliver so he can kind of share for us. But Oliver, first of all, welcome to the Leadership Factory.
Thank you.
And my first question for you is, when you heard about this government proposal, I'm sure you've heard thousands of ideas on, so what made this one unique, and then what made you want to tackle this project and write Leadership?
Great questions. Well, as you know, I've been teaching and writing about freedom for almost 20 years now, and during that time, I've had no shortage of people coming forward with proposals of, here's how we fix America, here's how we solve the challenges that are out there. Government's broken. Washington's not going to fix anything. Here's what we need to do. And of course, I agree with a lot of that. But over the years, I got a number of proposals from a lot of different people with a lot of different backgrounds and different perspectives. The proposals always pretty much fell into one of two camps. Either they were proposals that said, we need to go right back to the founders. We need to do exactly what the founders did. We need to repeal the 17th Amendment and change this and change that. A lot of good ideas, but as you know, Americans, as a general rule, as a rule of thumb, Americans are futurists. We want to move forward. We want to consider what we do right now better than what came in the past. So any proposal that really smacks of we got to go back, we got to go back, we got to go back is not going to fly with the American people. It's not realistic. because Americans as a people, we want to progress, we want to move forward, we want to be better than the past. So even though those proposals had a lot of good ideas, they were just never, it was never anything that I felt like, wow, this will really sell. There would always be a few people maybe on the right or maybe on the left who would like it, but it wasn't going to sell to the, to the American populace. The other type of proposal that came was something along the lines of, let's scrap everything that the founders did, and let's just come up with this brand new thing that just, scraps the whole Constitution and gets rid of the whole idea. And here's this new thing, there's new technology, let's just go to online democracy, or, a number of different proposals. And again, I never felt that those were things that would really sell with the American people, and I'm not sure they should sell, because the American founding principles mean something. They really did create the best freedom model in history. Not perfect by any stretch, but certainly better than any other system we know of in history. And so I always wished there was a way to combine those, something futuristic, something that would move into the future and be a real, not let's go back, but something that really built into this American ideal of we're going to improve on things, we're going to innovate, we're going to take what we have and make it better, and at the same time build on those founding principles. And then along comes Orrin Woodward, out of a business background, leadership background, and when he told me that he wanted to meet, I was excited to meet. We had met before, but he wanted to meet on a specific proposal he said he had. So I wasn't sure what it was. I didn't know whether it was business oriented. I didn't know what the proposal was, but I was excited. I got there to the meeting with him. We were talking, and he said, "Hey, I want to show you this proposal I have for basically fixing America." And I smiled, and in the back of my mind, I'm going, okay, is this going to be one of these scrap everything proposals, or is it going to be a go back proposal? Because again, over the years, just from so many different perspectives, that's what I'd always heard. And Orrin pulls out this proposal, and it's this long list, and he had it printed out, and we start going through the points. And I just got more excited and more excited and more excited as we went, because what Orrin did is he instead of trying to copy the founders, he emulated them. He took their principles, he took the concepts that they built the whole modern freedom system on, and he structured those based on the principles, not on the exact, not on a go back to what they did, but on a let's innovate, let's initiate something better, let's adapt to our modern perspective, let's take the founding principles and let's adapt them, let's apply them, let's implement them in an innovative way. And as we went through it, and it took us most of a day, we talked about all the different proposals from a bunch of different angles. I mean, it was a fun discussion. We talked in the hotel room, we talked in the hotel lobby, we went to lunch, we drove around. We had a lot of fun with it, and it was, it's a great memory. But as the day went on, we got more and more excited, or at least I did, Orrin seemed to. We got more and more excited about the potential of this really making a difference. And it started out with 30-something, maybe 32, 30, I can't remember exactly, but 30-something proposals that he had put together. And all of them were this unique blend of innovating, but using the founding principles to do so. And I was really moved by it. And then we both decided, hey, I said, this is powerful, this is unique, this is different, this is something that can really make it, this is something that can really work. Because it's built on American founding thinking. It incorporates the principles and the ideals of freedom that really work and that are proven. But it does so in a catchy, innovative, different way that the American people can get excited about and not feel like we're just going back to something that's unproven. And as I got more excited about it, I started adding, we started brainstorming, well, maybe we need this, maybe we need, I think we ended up with 40-something. By the time I said, well, what about this and what about that? Not just that day, but in the days that followed, we kept talking, we kept discussing, and we ended up with a number, and then we started breaking them down to, okay, but which ones are realistic? 40's too many to promote. And we ended up with the book Leadership. We talked about a bunch of different ideas. Should this be a political science book? Should this be a business book, like a 7 Habits kind of a book or something? Should this be? And we finally ended up saying, who are we really trying to reach? We're trying to reach business leaders. We're trying to reach people in business communities entrepreneurs and executives, people who have so much leadership in them, and they have the experience, and they have the wisdom, and they have the understanding, they know how to lead, but their leadership is basically latent in terms of politics, because they put all of their leadership into business, into their careers, into their companies, which makes sense. That's what they're doing. But we said, what if Washington's not going to fix this? Because I think anyone who looks at it closely is pretty much convinced they're not. They've had decades to do so. It doesn't matter which party we elect; neither one's going to fix it. And that's not to take away from some really good public servants who are there trying to do great things. Good for them. But the system itself is not going to be fixed from within, from Washington. Something else is going to happen. And where's it going to come from? And as we looked around at the country, we said, it's business leadership. There may be other places. There's certainly a lot of potential in the youth. There's a lot of potential in a number of sectors. Parents who really care and are trying to make a difference. But business needs to lead it. And so we said, we need to write a business fable, something that will speak to their language and their genre, something they'll actually read, something they'll get excited about and want to read. We need to keep it short enough that any business leader will get intrigued on the plane, like Orrin said earlier, and read the whole thing. And then I went home, he went home, we went home with an outline and some ideas, and we spent the next 6 weeks or so just pounding through the chapters, where I was so excited I got home immediately and just started writing.
That's what I remember, Oliver, is like, it seemed like I just got home and maybe one night passed and you sent me the first 4 or 5 chapters and I was already blown away. Like when I read that, I'm like, man, this is like inspired work, and it's just like you took those concepts and boom, you were off and running.
Well, I was so moved by the potential of this to really make a difference. And as we wrote the book, I would write a few chapters, I would send them to Orrin, I would give them to my wife, Orrin would give them to his wife, and then I would try to take a day off or something, but our wives would say, hey, wait, where's the next chapter? So we couldn't get a break, because between Rachel and Lori, they're like, wait, where's the next chapter? What happens with these people? So we just kept doing it. I would write a chapter, I would send it to Orrin, he looked it over, he would call me back and say something like, man, I love it, don't change a thing. And then he would give me like 40 changes to it, which were really cool. And it was really great. And his changes just totally took it. And then it took it from one level to a higher level. And then I would say, well, wait a minute, what about this? It was one of those experiences, the whole writing of it. There's times in business, there's times in life where you're working with somebody and there's just this flow, this synergy that just kicks in. And you accomplish so much more working with the person than you could have yourself. And I found myself so many times, I would send, I would take Orrin's proposals and then the things that we had brainstormed together, and I would take his things and I would write them into the story, and then I would send it to him, and he'd come back and have these ideas that just made it so much better. And then I would find myself having ideas that I thought made it even better, and then he would respond to mine. It was just that, and he would make it better. It was one of those powerful synergistic moments of just writing this, going deep, having fun with it. And I think both of us really got really intrigued with the story, and I just couldn't wait to see where it was going. I would wake up at nights and literally stay up all night writing because I just couldn't sleep. I wanted to see what would happen to the characters.
That is awesome. First of all, Oliver, I want to congratulate you on obviously getting up to the New York Times bestseller. As you know, Orrin's no stranger to that. Like with 13 Resolved and the leadership, launching a leadership revolution. He certainly has done very well here recently with getting books up in the New York Times bestseller. But to do it so quickly, to be in the top 20 in Amazon, and just overnight, literally, there's obviously an interest in what we're sharing today, and there should be an interest. But I have a very important question, and over the last several years, I get a little upset when I see this left-right wing debate going on, and people get so focused on conservative or the liberals, and they miss everything. They miss all the forest of the trees, in my opinion. And when I looked at leadership, my question is how do we, because it's obviously not left or right. Freedom, the essence of freedom is right there in the DNA of it. How do we get people to understand that it has nothing to do with left or nothing to do with right, and how it's important so that people can really see the message that you and Orrin are conveying to the world with this book?
You know, that's a great question. I think that's one of the most unique and interesting things about this book, is that it really is not, it's not held by the right or by the left. It really gives answers and solutions that are about freedom. I like the way Orrin says it. He says, I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, I'm an American. And I think we need more people who are thinking about it from that perspective. This is a book for Americans. This is a book for leaders. This is a book to tell Americans it's time to finally stand up and lead. Politicians won't solve these problems. Washington doesn't have the solutions. It's going to take regular Americans who take some of that talent and that skill and that experience they have as leaders in their businesses, in their, in their other walks of life that aren't politics, to move into the leadership realm of society and have an impact and make a difference. In fact, that's what the leadership means. It's a shift from looking, see, right now what happens is anytime there's a big problem in our country, we naturally, the media does this, almost everyone does this, we naturally look to Washington and we say, all right, what are you going to do to solve it? Or if it's a more local problem, we look to our state legislature or our state governor. We say, okay, what are you going to do to solve it? And the answer is, as hard as many of people will try, they're not going to do much of anything to solve it. The reality is that it's not either not going to be solved, or it's going to take an entrepreneurial, innovative approach, and that's something that government is not good at. Innovation is not their thing. But business leaders and thought leaders and regular people who really think deeply and take the time to step out of their normal comfort zone, take a look at what's going on and step out to make a difference. That's how real challenges and real problems get solved. And when that happens, when that innovation comes from the people, politicians eventually will figure it out and follow suit. But we really need the innovation to come from the only place that innovation really does come from, which is people with an entrepreneurial mindset.
Now let me ask you, Oliver, just a question on this. In my understanding this right, that the Founding Fathers really wanted government to really overall protect us. That was the main role of the government. And that pretty much, everything else kind of happened outside of the government, the separation of the government.
It was not only the main role, it was really the only role. The role of government was to protect people's inalienable rights. And specifically, it was to protect our rights from two dangers. One danger was international, international thugs, international invasion, international attacks, people on an international level, other nations, other groups that would want to come in and take away our inalienable rights. And that's why the states and the locales banded together to support a federal government, which was to support us from something that would be big, that would be national level. Right. The locales and the local governments and the state governments were designed to protect us from the other source of attack, which would be criminal activity, other people trying to break in our homes or steal things, or whatever they would do. So local crime was to be protected by local and state level government, or in other countries, provincial. And the national or federal level was to be something that came from outside that, other governments, attackers, invasions. Right. And that's really all that government was invented. That's why it was invented. Let me back up from that. Actually, there are two types of governments invented in history. There's those that are invented by those who want to conquer and control people, and there's those that are invented by citizens to create a free government. So when I say that the American government was that second kind, it was the kind of government that was created by the people, established by the people on purpose, with the fundamental goal of protecting us, of protecting our rights, of protecting us from, again, on a federal level, international conflict or invasion, and on a local level, any kind of crime or attack or that kind of thing. The other kind of government, force-based government, whose purpose is to conquer and control and dominate people, does exist in history, and of course, it has a long tradition of doing much more than protecting us. But people should think about that when the government that was established, an American government or a Canadian or an English government that was founded to be a protection of rights, when it starts doing the things that forced conquer-based governments have done in history, that should be our first clue. Wait a minute, something's off here. our government that was established for freedom is now based on a focus on force. Clearly it's going in the wrong direction.
Now, Oliver, this ties in. This is a perfect spot, Tony, to bring up the 5 laws of decline. You know,
Yes.
My background is manufacturing systems. I love systems. You know, when I look at anything, I don't look at the waves. I look at the tide, what's going on underneath, because you can see the waves might be blowing one way because of the wind, but wherever the tide's going is ultimately where the water's going. And, you know, and so this 5 laws of decline, you talked about the 2 different types of government. I believe America was formed as one type of government, but through the 5 laws of decline is kind of shifting over to more of a forced government, and it's systematic. In other words, you know, the example I use is imagine a pool that has different jets. And if all the jets are blowing in one direction and you've got 5 jets set up and they're all running, you get a current going in that pool. And if the current's going in a direction of decline, and that's kind of what's happening in America, we've got these 5 laws working against us all the time. So I remember the first time we sat down, we started talking through the 5 laws of decline. So what is your take on the 5 laws of decline, and why is that so important to this book?
Well, it really is the it's the centerpiece of the book. It's the start of the book's really broken into 2 parts. The first roughly half of the book is about the 5 laws of decline and how these 5 laws of decline, which are unknown to most people, are eating away at our big institutions. They're eating away at our business institutions. They're eating away at our government. They're eating away at our citizenship and our freedoms as a society. They're eating, and they're doing it, again, quietly, because people don't really understand the 5 laws, don't know them, and so we're not able to counteract them either on a political or a business or even on a family level unless we can identify what they are and understand what's happening with them. So the first half of the book, and that's why we feel that it's so important to get this book out to the American people, the more the better, so that these 5 laws of decline can become understood by everyone, by your leaders, by your parents, by your average citizen, by your unaverage citizen. Everyone needs to understand these 5 laws of decline, because by understanding them, it will make so much sense to them to turn on the news and see what's happening. The news is confusing to people. They see all these crises, they see all these challenges, then they see all these political leaders and talking heads saying, well, here's the answer, but then the answers never get implemented. What's that about? Why does it keep going that way? A lot of people in our day just turn it off because it makes no sense to them. If these are the problems, and these are the solutions, well, then why don't we just apply the solution? Well, we don't. And there's a number of reasons for those. In fact, there's 5 reasons for those. It's the 5 laws of decline. And once a person understands those 5 laws, they're going to look at that and they're going to say, oh, I get what's going on. I get what I need to do. I get why this is this way. The second half of the book is then once the people know the 5 laws of decline, here are some solutions. And we narrowed our list of, started out with just above 30 that Orrin handed to me. Again, we brainstormed more and got up around, I don't know if we ever got as high as 50, maybe mid-40s, but we did a bunch of them.
On it.
And then we narrowed it down. But we narrowed it down in this book to 9 specific proposals that, if applied, and again, these are built on the founding thinking of freedom, but they're new, they're fresh, they're unique, they're a new approach. It's not, let's go back, it's let's go forward with these 9 proposals that could really make a difference. Giving our current situation, our current Constitution, where it stands right now, where our society and the laws stand, add these 9 into the mix, and this is a real change. This is going to change the entire direction of our society if we can apply these 9 or even a few of them. And you know, and Orrin and I have others beyond the 9, but these were the ones we said, let's start with these. If we can get some of these implemented into our society, these are real solutions that can really happen. But they're not, these 9 solutions are not going to occur in any reality unless the people understand the 5 laws of decline. Because if they understand what's really happening, then they're naturally going to move in this direction. We keep saying the 5 laws of decline.
Yeah, I was going to say, Oliver, Tony, I mean, give Tony and everybody who's watching, give them just a nutshell of what are these 5 laws, and knowing with your 25, 30 years experience, I mean, working with W. Cleon Skousen, who I think is one of the best scholars of our Constitution out there, your perspective of explain the 5 laws of decline, and then explain how the 5 laws of decline have worked on the Constitution from your perspective.
Perfect. Without just listing them in order, let me just take one at a time, and we'll see how far we get. If we only get to one or two, that's fine. People can get the book and go, more detail and study it.
Sure, and it also
five, that's great too.
In Orrin's blog, he's done a really good job, as you know,
yes,
of covering that as well. So people that want to get an understanding of it,
excellent.
I've read him. It's unbelievable, the information. I know you guys were collaborating on that, but in his blog, it's such a great synopsis of the 5 laws of decline, and for someone to get it just like that. So
absolutely,
it's a great way to get it right away.
Let me give one example. One of the laws is Bastiat's laws, and I think Orrin did such a fantastic job of pulling together these 5 laws from all these different places in history and all these different people who put them together. And when you see how these fit together, it's just amazing. I mean, he was taking it from a standpoint originally, I think, of here's why businesses decline. If your business isn't succeeding, understand these 5 laws and let's apply these 5 laws to your business, and then we'll know which one's breaking down, and then we know how to address it. We know how to fix it. When he started telling me these 5 laws in a context of the nation, it just clicked for me, and I saw immediately how that it fit. And anytime I apply them to a current event or a current issue, it becomes immediately clear which law is the lead in this one. One law I'll share is Bastiat's law. Bastiat's law, in a nutshell, this comes from Frederick Bastiat, who wrote The Law, What is Seen and What is Not Seen, and a number of other essays in the 19th century. One fantastic, basically what he says, and this is just, it's a fantastic thing to understand, is that people would rather get things easily than get things the difficult way. Most people would rather take the easy road to any result than the hard road to that result. I mean, that's obvious. But when it's applied to government, it becomes a huge thing. How many people are on welfare? How many people are on some sort of government subsidy, some sort of government funding? How many people in society, and how many laws are passed at the national and local and state levels simply because there's people out there saying, I'd rather have the easy way, and leaders who say, well, let's make it easy for people. That law is so profound and so powerful because it says that in any given society, once you start to use government resources to make things easy for people, that is naturally going to grow. And there's pretty much no way to stop it, because to stop it, look what you have to do. You have to convince the people who are having the easy way to stop doing it the easy way and start doing it the hard way. And you have to convince other people, the voters, and you have to convince the voters who are allowing it to happen to do the hard thing, to step up, get involved, and stop it. So even the ones who aren't receiving the easy way or the easy funds are still getting the benefit of it because it's easy for them to just sit back and let it happen. And not until their taxes start to skyrocket or until regulation starts to impinge on them and their business do they say, hey, wait a minute, how did we get this far along? And by that point, in many cases, it's too late, or it's a lot more difficult to stop it. So you create this thing, Bastiat's law creates this scenario where you've got a whole nation and it grows and grows, and I think now it's around 47 to 51%, depending on which statistic you're looking at, people who are in some sort of government handout. When you reach that point, you're at a point where the easy thing is for those people to keep getting it, and you've got to convince them to drop it and do the hard thing. That's a hard sell, and they're almost half the population, so there you have a huge voting block. And secondly, if you want to stop it, you've got to convince the other people who aren't receiving the benefit to do the hard thing, step out, get involved, make their influence felt, maybe run for office or get really involved with those who are in office. That's hard. They'd rather do it the easy way, so they just focus on their career and say, well, it's all going to heck in a handbasket. I guess I'll just focus on my thing, because that's the easy way. The politicians, in order to do something about it, have also got, this is a third thing, they've got to take the hard road. They've got to go back to their constituency, stand up in front of them, argue with them, tell them they don't want these benefits and that they do need to stand up and make their influence felt. Most voting electorates, that's not what they vote for. They're like, just, okay, we'll vote for you or we won't vote for you. I mean, look what happened to Mitt Romney when he said the 47% who were going to vote for, without getting political one way or the other, if a Democratic president would have said the same thing, or a Democratic candidate, they would get a similar return from the populace who says, "Wait a minute, you can't take away our benefits. Why are you attacking us? Those are legitimate government benefits." So Bastiat's law is this huge thing that eats away at our society. I mean, you could apply it to business too. How many people within a business are productive versus those who are unproductive, who are finding the easy way out today on the job, or the easy way out this week on the job, and leaders find ways to have a scoreboard of who are the employees who are taking the easy road, and who are the ones that are doing the hard work that are really creating productivity. It's hard for nations to have that same kind of a scoreboard, but that's what we did with leadership, is created those nine proposals, those 9 resolves at the end. These are the scoreboard for how to really make a difference and really change things. So I got going on that. I don't even know if I answered the question.
You did. Bastiat's law is like, you look at it this way. You can, in life, you can either produce to survive, or you can plunder others' production to survive. And if you start rewarding the plundering of other people's production, then believe me, a whole bunch of people will move that way because of Bastiat's law and say, well, hey, I want to plunder someone's production too. And you start out 5% of the people are plundering 95% of the people. Then if it grows to 10% of the people are plundering 90%. Well, it doesn't work when 60% of the people are plundering 40%. Eventually, the numbers don't work anymore, and society collapses. And you can go back in history with the lens of the 5 laws of decline. I'm going to say something absolutely crazy here, but I'm telling you, historically, that you can look at any society, you can look at any company that failed, you can look at any community that failed, and when they failed, you will see the 5 laws of decline. It's like putting on a set of glasses, and all of a sudden, what you couldn't see before is so crystal clear. And when I finally put together the 5 laws of decline and started reading history with this lens, I was so blown away that I said, I got to track down Oliver. I've got to share with him what I'm discovering, because I don't know. And I can remember that our first, you're like, all right, share your proposal. And before we even got into the actual proposal, we kind of talked through the 5 laws. And I can remember the moment, Oliver, I can remember him straightening up and saying, okay, now explain that again. All right. And then I said, you know what, I think, and Oliver, because of his background historically of understanding the Constitution, understanding what the founders' intentions were, understanding why they were checking the government, because whether the founders knew the 5 laws of decline, they understood human nature. They understood that people would prefer a handout over a hand up. They understood they would prefer plunder over production, or at least a majority of people would. And so they were putting checks and balances in place. So Oliver, can you go in that direction and explain just quickly what was the founders' intentions? What did they see the role of government? And then how did the 5 laws of decline, Bastiat's law being the pivot point, of course, how did the 5 laws of decline start to seep into their work and literally expand it to where it's now moving into a forced direction?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course they didn't, as you said, they didn't call it the 5 laws of decline, but the understanding of these principles are clear in their work. It's clearly there. And as you said, go back through history and look. I mean, go to Durant's, 11-volume history of the world. Go to any civilization. Go to the Greeks. Go to the Romans. All the way through, including the Eastern cultures, and you're going to find these 5 laws at place in a declining society. And in a rising society, you're going to find leaders and the nation specifically addressing these 5 laws. Again, not by name, but addressing these principles head on. Really powerful. I think Jefferson, in terms of the founders, Jefferson probably said it best when he said, and this gets to another one of the 5 laws. I'm going out of order here, but one of the laws is the law of diminishing returns, which goes so well. Well, it's an economic law, but when you apply it to a government, it's incredible the impact it has. The law of diminishing returns says, as applied to government, basically says as the government gets bigger and bigger and bigger, it's going to do less and less and less for each citizen. It's going to accomplish less of what it's supposed to for the individuals and specific communities, because it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and so it becomes less and less efficient. less and less effective in what it's supposed to accomplish. Now, link those two together. Bastiat's law, people would rather take the easy road than the hard road. And the law of diminishing returns, as the government gets bigger, it gets less effective, it gets less efficient. Put those together, and what you've got is our modern society. I mean, lock, stock, and barrel, you just got what we're living under. Because our government gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Why? Because entitlements grow and grow and grow. People want more and more and more the easy way. Voters want more and more ease. I don't want to get involved and stop it. And politicians want easy votes, so it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And as the government gets bigger and bigger and bigger, because of the law of diminishing returns, it gets less and less effective, less and less efficient, and it's easier for corruption to enter in. It's easier for all the wrong agendas to keep winning, because now they're even more difficult to stop by the voters who see what's happening. And so these things combine together. Jefferson, without calling it the law of diminishing returns or Bastiat's law, said that the key to free government, the key to freedom, is to divide and subdivide government. Government, he said, and I'm switching back and forth between Jefferson's words and Madison's words, but lump their argument together, and basically what they said was, if men were angels, there would be no need of government. Men aren't angels, so you're going to have foreign attack, you're going to have local crime, you're going to have people who, because crime is simply the easy way of taking from somebody something they already have that usually they gained the hard way. It's just another type of plunder, as Orrin said. So men aren't angels, and because of that, people are going to try to take the easy road and take from the people who work hard to earn what they get. There's going to be people who try to take it through crime, through government, through whatever it is. And so Jefferson said government is necessary to stop crime, to stop invasion, but the only way to remain safe, the only way for government itself not to become the biggest entity that's trying to take things the easy way, the only way to stop that is to divide and subdivide government. And so they separated the powers at the federal level. They checked and balanced those powers. They separated the levels of government. So you had local government, you had state governments with their own constitutions and their own sovereignty, their own power to make final decisions. And then you have the federal government, and again, all of these were checked and balanced between each other and between levels. The whole point of that was to keep Bastiat's law and the law of diminishing returns from working together to create bigger and bigger government that took more and more from those who worked for it and gave less and less in terms of the real benefits to everyone else. I mean, that was the whole founding principle, and you can understand the whole founding viewpoint really from the standpoint of just those two laws of decline. They really created the Constitution, not just at the federal level, but the local constitutions, the state constitutions that were written beforehand, and the local constitutions. For example, we have on record hundreds of these state constitutions and these hundreds of state and town constitutions together. The town constitutions are really fascinating, and we wrote this into our 9 proposals for fixing the country, is that the town constitutions were all built around the same theme. Some of them written in some of them written in Georgia, some of them written in Massachusetts, and everything in between, all up and down the coast, all up and down the coast in the 13 colonies, you had these towns. But an interesting thing, whether it was in Virginia or Massachusetts, which came from very different histories, the Jamestown history and the Pilgrim history, they were there for different reasons. Jamestown was founded for monetary reasons. They were trying to make a profit. They were trying to create a business. The Pilgrims were escaping and trying to get religious freedom. And same with the Puritans who came to the same place. So you have, it's interesting though that these people who created these societies for different things, and the Carolinas for yet another purpose. It was a business purpose, but it was a totally different company. And yet all these towns, hundreds of them, up and down the coast, set up their towns, and their constitutions are almost identical. They're almost the same. What they did is they had one night a week where all the citizens from the town would come together, hear all the major challenges, and vote on what the solutions were. They did this all up and down, and it wasn't just here that it was done. Orrin and I were just talking a couple of days ago about how Gandhi, when he was trying to reform India, did the same thing in India, built on these local get-togethers of all the adults coming together and making these decisions. The founders knew that in order to have freedom, you had to divide and subdivide government. And so they did it with separations of power, they did it with checks and balances, they wrote a constitution to do it at the federal level, and before that they had written all these constitutions to do it at the town levels. Now fast forward to today, we still have the federal constitution, we still have state constitutions, but there are almost no towns, I don't know of any, in North America where the decisions are made by the adults all the adults in the town coming together, talking about their small town issues or small community. It doesn't have to be, say in a city like Cincinnati or Columbus, you'd have a lot of smaller towns in order for a group of adults to get together to make these decisions. I mean, if people have watched the movies, or the television show Little House on the Prairie, they saw how that happened all the time. It's all through our history, and it shows up, in a lot in our literature. It shows up in our television programming of that era, where the towns would the town leaders and the adults in the town would come together. They would talk about challenges. They would discuss possible solutions. They would vote, and then they would assign people to go implement these solutions. As long as we don't have local citizens involved on that kind of a level where they really have a vote today, local citizens, it's, again, Bostiet's law, it's just easier for them to stay out of it. But you give them a vote, you give them a say, and all of a sudden, a lot of them are more interested in being involved. The founders didn't write any of that into the Constitution, that local stuff, because it was just the way it was. It was like a fish in water. They saw no need to put water into the Constitution because it was just the experience they lived under. But over time, through the 19th and the 20th century, as we lost those local things, the Constitution, which was designed to work with those local structures, when the local structures disappeared, the Constitution, at the national level, they just began to either ignore or start breaking parts of the Constitution, and there were no local citizen bodies with votes and say and power to stand up and do anything about it. So the whole thing was really strongly built on a founding ideal.
Well, that's amazing. When you start thinking about the grassroots power of how the country was built, if you look at our profession, Orrin, $150 billion in sales, it was built on the same concept, grassroots. The Thursday night meetings where you could vote and people came together, isn't that kind of like a hotel opportunity meeting? And I think I know one company that maybe you and I both know that at one time was a certain way, but if you look at the everything you're talking about, it happened to them as they became a big bureaucracy. I think you can look at that, and as I see it through those lenses, as I look at it as I've been learning from you, and as I've been understanding what you and Oliver have been teaching, I look at that as a whole different experience, but you start to think about all of this. Now, for those that are watching us now you're starting, I think, to understand why what I said in the very beginning of the show, why this very well may be the most important Leadership Factory Hangout we've done, because it has everything to do with what? Our freedom. Okay, and at the end of the day, if one thing that I've learned in being an entrepreneur for 30 years is that you can't mess with our freedom. I mean, let's face it. I mean, that's what makes direct selling, that's what makes network marketing so powerful, is that any ordinary person has a level playing field, and if they want to be extraordinary, like an Orrin Woodward in 1994 decided he wanted to be free, right? Well, we know what happened. We know the rest of the story. It's being written now. Because he decided, but he was ordinary, but wanted to become extraordinary. That's the gift that we have, that we were born with, but we can lose it as easily as we have it, and we're losing it day by day. I see it. I think any business leader sees it, and I don't mean to become overly melodramatic, but for those of you that watch us, please hear what we're saying. This is important. This is really important for our future, for our family, our children, our grandchildren, to understand this. There's nothing more important. I mean, I know this is a show and it's about leadership, and I know that it revolves around the direct selling profession and all of the wonderful things that we talk about. And we could be sitting here talking about, how to build a system or how to do an opportunity meeting or how to train somebody. But without this, we got nothing. We got nothing at all. Anyway,
let me elaborate on that, because that's the whole point of leadership. In other words, I feel like our whole profession is a whole bunch of people who are teaching them how to be entrepreneurs. We're teaching them how to make decisions and have freedom and grow and become big fish, so to speak, in their companies. Well, what's the point of becoming a big fish if all the water gets poisoned and all the fish die? In other words, we've got a responsibility, all of us as entrepreneurs, as leaders and leadership, we have a responsibility to protect the water for everybody, not just our company, not just even our profession, but for the whole country, for society at large. This is that significant. The 5 laws of decline were originally applied to leadership culture. The 5 laws of decline work within a company and destroy the culture of performance. People would love to have political results where, hey, I've been here so long and I'm so-and-so's bud, so I get a special deal. Well, you create a special deals culture, I promise you that company's going down. You create a special deals country, I promise you that country's going down, because another country will still be on a performance-based culture and they will kick our butt. America and Western society is getting its butt kicked because we're trying to have a special deals culture, and the rest of the world's still playing on a performance-based culture. And so we've got to wake up, and we've got to clean up the water so that the fish can grow based upon performance. And that kind of leads me, Oliver, into the next question. Before, I don't want a show where we try to depress everybody and tell all the problems. Now, I promise you, before we get off this show, we're going to talk about specific proposals, specific ways that leaders can step up in their communities, leaders can step up in their states, and ultimately in society at large, and create a leadership so that we can restore the greatness of Western civilization, because it is that big a deal. But before we get to the solution, let's go back one more step, Oliver. And you wrote a book called 1913. I don't know if you want to start there, but that book was phenomenal in describing 3 major things that happened in 1913. But what I don't think you did in that book is describe how 1913 and the 5 laws marry together. So if you want to kind of share what happened in 1913 and how does that wrap in with the 5 laws of decline and has created this slide that we see going on.
Love that. I don't want to spend the rest of our time on all the details. I'll hit them fast. So 3 things happened in 1913 that really changed the whole culture. One was the 16th Amendment, one was the 17th Amendment, and one was the passing of the Federal Reserve. The 16th Amendment basically said, it was the Income Tax Amendment, which basically said, it changed something that the founders had believed in, which was that all tax money should be collected at the local and state levels. And so they didn't allow the federal government to collect any taxes, because they said the states can send tax money to the federal government, and that's how the federal government will operate, on money that comes from the state governments. But they didn't want federal officials to be the ones who were sitting down looking at the citizens directly. They always wanted to keep a check, a balance, a separation between citizens and federal officials. They had seen how bad it could be under the British structure, and they didn't want to go to that place where the national government was collecting the taxes. And so with the 16th Amendment, we ruined that and went to, the government can, now tax everybody. The 17th Amendment changed the way that the senators were elected. They used to be elected by the state legislature, so that when they went back to Washington, the states oversaw everything that happened through the Senate. The Senate could basically, it had a check or a balance on everything that went on in Washington, so Washington couldn't do anything without the state's permission, and the 17th Amendment changed that. And then, of course, the Federal Reserve allowed us to print money, inflate the money, print fiat money that can inflate and become worthless, which is a way that government makes money, because it prints it and then spends it at today's values. And most of the business people listening already understand this. But then it inflates the money so that everybody else has to spend their money at tomorrow or next week's values, which are worthless. And those 3 changes really restructured the whole thing. Orrin's point was, how did the American people allow that to happen? Why did we allow the 16th Amendment, the 17th Amendment, the Federal Reserve? Why did we allow that to come into to happen? And the answer is that the people by that time had just basically, they had become so focused on their own lives, their careers, the westward expansion, doing the things in their personal life, their families, their work, that they sat back and they allowed this to occur. And that actually leads to another one of the 5 laws of decline, which is Sturgeon's law, which says that 10% or less of the people are going to make most of the difference in society. Another way to say that is 90% of the people aren't going to do much of anything. 90% of the people or more are just going to, today it's a lot more than 90%.
We've seen that before.
Yeah. And this is real. I mean, you certainly see that in business. You see that in leadership. I mean, that's one of the things that leaders do is try to. Hold
on a sec. Tony, are you saying that people would sign up in their own business, actually pay money to get into a business and then do nothing? Like 90% of them? You got to be kidding me.
Or I think I've even seen people take business kits and put them on their wall as art. I mean, yeah. Yeah.
It's like anybody who's been involved in network marketing understands Sturgeon's law is alive and well.
Oh yeah.
And apply this to government. Are you telling me that people with freedom to do what they want, they don't have the state military coming into their house and telling them how many kids they can have yet? They don't have. I mean, we could just go through this long list of things. Your kid's this age and he tested this way and this, so he has to go to this school and he has to take these classes and we have to put him in this training. I mean, we have so many freedoms as families. As you know, marriage is still sacred to a large segment of the American people. But freedom, you take away freedom and those things are on the table. Those things all of a sudden, the government's telling you what you have to do with your life, and your kids what they have to do with their life. And you literally live in fear in the night, and someone knocks on the door at night. I mean, this is the majority of people in the world today. So they hear a knock on the door at night, and they are terrorized because they don't know if they'll ever see their father again. I mean, are you telling me people would have something as precious as freedom and use it as art? We put up pictures of the founders or the flag, we fly, but then when it comes time to actually make a difference, we take Bastia, we take the easy way. We don't do something. So that's what leadership is about. I mean, that's what this book is about, is the idea that we need a shift in leadership. Because if we believe that Washington is going to suddenly, miraculously, start doing it differently than it's done for the last 40 years, especially for the last 15 years, if we believe that Washington is all of a sudden, miraculously, just going to fix our problems and we're not going to keep going in the direction we are, we're fooling ourselves. We're lying to ourselves. Washington is not going to fix America's problems. If America's problems are going to be fixed, it's going to be by less than 10%. I mean, I wish, Orrin and I wish it could be 10%. Wow, I think we'd be thrilled if we could get 3%. If we could get 3% of the population who cares about freedom, who loves freedom, who understand, to just stand up and make their influence felt, especially business leaders. Give us 3% of the top business leaders, the top entrepreneurial, business thinking, network marketing, whatever their business focus. Give us the top 3% who will spend a few hours a week giving their heart and soul to making a difference on freedom the way that they have in other parts of leadership, and we will see this country change. We will see a shift in leadership. And until we see that kind of shift in leadership, we're going to see crisis after crisis after crisis out of Washington, and they're going to use every crisis to regulate more, tax more, and decrease our freedoms. That's what leadership is all about. 1913 and those things that happened, as well as the things that are happening today, are happening precisely because you've got almost half the population who just wants the easy road, government help us, and another half of the population who really could make a difference, who understand and love freedom, who could make it, who are content to sit back and just let it happen. So Sturgeon's law, we don't even need 10%. We don't need 50%. We need maybe 3%. Boy, if we could get, think of this, if we could get 1% of the best business leaders in our society to get serious about freedom, to get serious about promoting freedom, about standing for freedom, about getting out there and promoting, help everybody understand those 5 laws of decline, and then help people start applying these 9 proposals we've had, or reject our 9 proposals, any proposals that are at the same level, the same kind of thinking. If you don't like ours, come up with your own. Like the founders, moving forward, innovating to fix our society. If we could get 1% of our business leaders in this country to take that seriously and to give their leadership wisdom, their potential, their resources, their contacts, to go out and start making an influence, not through some group, but just them leading and doing it, we would see a turnaround. And until we see that kind of shift in leadership, we're going to see more and more from Washington. And because of the law of momentum, it's going to get worse and worse and worse because it's speeding up. We've got what we're getting from Washington today is worse than what we were getting 6 years ago, and that was worse than what we got 6 years before that. And we're talking in terms technically of the amount of spending. You know, the Bush administration tripled the amount of spending over the Clinton administration, and then the Obama administration came in and tripled the amount of government spending over the Bush administration just in the first term.
Hey, Oliver, that reminds me of that old joke. You know, it's like, how'd you go broke? Well, slowly at first and then really fast at the end.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly where we are. There will come a time, if current trends continue and the leadership doesn't occur, there will come a time where we'll have to step up. But by then, the problem will be so bad that we'll be stepping up in maintaining any kind of, I mean, it'll be survival if we keep going in this direction.
Yeah, you know, Oliver, I know we're running out of time, and I want to make sure we sum this up on a positive perspective. But what you're hitting is so true. It's like if we do not, like, we are not at the point where we can afford. It's like the sunshine patriots. Like, we've got to wake up and recognize that we are in critical times for leaders. We've got a warfare and welfare state. This is not a Democrat or a Republican, because either one, the warfare state would bankrupt a company. The welfare state would bankrupt a company. But when you try to combine both of them, the warfare and welfare state, what you get is a country that started in 1787, sorry, and you take 200 years go by 1987, we were somewhere around a $1 trillion national debt. Today, we have increases of over $1 trillion every year. That is truly the slow at first, very fast at the end. This is not something, you can turn off your computer, you can just ignore anything I said, but this is not something, this is Jeremiah speaking, saying this cannot stand. We must address this. We need leaders. Every single household, every person watching this has to recognize that you are responsible to balance your budget. If you do not balance your budget over time, banks come knocking on your door, they take your car. Banks come knocking on your door, tell you can leave the house now, it's not yours anymore. And you have to address that. You reap what you sow. It is absolutely insane to me that every single person in America is held to responsibility to balance their own budget, yet we elect, quote, the best and brightest and put them into a government position where they're not responsible to even do something as simple as balance their budget. So we've got to get that core frame and say that no, political leadership has to go together, and from now on you are going to be held to your budget, and you're going to have to tell the people no. Despite they want the 5 laws of decline, you're going to have to tell them no. In fact, we're going to help you tell them no, because we are going to limit the amount of money you're going to get. Because there's no such thing as limited government until you limit the funds the government has access to. Because money and power always go together. We're going to limit the funds. Let's start at 10%. You can say, we'll never survive on 10%. Well, that's what every stinking person will say. Everybody says, no, I need $1 million to live on. I need 100,000 to live on. Everybody wants more than they're making. That's why we have the national endemic of debt that we have today in individuals, localities, state, and federal. But we just draw the line and say, your government can defend us internally and externally for 10%. Localities, that Oliver, you did such a great job of describing that, let's give the localities 4% and push as much government down to the local level as possible. Let's give the states 3% and push as much government away from the federal to the state to the localities as possible, and then give the federal 3% of all the money. That means 10% total. Just that alone is going to stimulate the economy like crazy, because people will have more of their money. And government has never created a job in its life. By definition, the government has to take from somebody to give to somebody else. It's like we got to get rid of this Robin Hood model of government and start having people that are entrepreneurs have money so they can go out and stimulate the economy by hiring people as entrepreneurs and creating businesses that help our society compete against other societies. Now imagine this model: 10%, 4% for the local, 3% for the state, 3% for the federal. If I'm a federal head, if I'm, quote, the president of the country, and I say, man, I've got this great idea for a war, I want to go to Iraq, I want to have some fun over there, I want to send millions of people and spend billions of dollars, but because I got to balance my budget, I don't have the money to do that, and I can't print money anymore because we don't allow just to print money. I can't play monopoly money, so I got to go to Oliver and Tony, who are both governors of states, and I got to go to all 50 states, stand before them without blushing, and say that I want to take your budget. I need you to give me half of your 3% so I can have enough money to go play war over in Iraq or any other country. Now, Tony, Oliver, are you really going to reach into your, this will be the first time in history a politician has to reach into his own pockets to hand over money to somebody. Are you honestly telling me, now you're not worried about Iraq coming over and invading America, I don't think, and unless there's some threat to your state, why would you let me, as the protector internally and externally for you, why would you let me take half of your budget? You know what you'd say?
That's the brilliant thing about it, because if I really am in danger, if the nation really is in danger from attack, then Tony and I are both going to vote yes.
That's the colonial America. The colonial America did unite together. They did work together when there was a common enemy. But if there's not a common enemy, we ensure that the 5 laws of decline work against one another. The state 5 laws of decline works against the federal 5 laws of decline, which works against the localities. So now we have government checking government. You and I are not big enough. Tony, you and I are not big enough to go to Washington and say, we need you to reduce our taxes. They're going to laugh at us. But when you have the states saying, no, we're not going to give you anymore, the federal government, the states are big enough that they can withstand and tell the federal government no. And now we've got the federal government cannot reach down to the local citizen. It has to work through the different units of government. And we have government checking government. And what happens is freedom is in the gaps. Freedom is in the gaps. By having the governments check one another, the people enjoy freedom because the governments battle with one another to make sure that neither one of them gets too strong to steal freedom from its citizens. That is the leadership. Is it going to be tough? It's going to be the toughest thing we've ever done in our life. But it's also the most necessary if we care about the posterity of America and Western civilization.
And it's not going to be nearly as tough as if we just let it continue and gain momentum and go where it's headed right now. And another thing in that that's so powerful, I mean, Orrin just outlined one of our 9 proposals. There's 9 in there. That's one of them where you really create teeth where the federal government has a limited budget. I mean, we're not even asking for a balanced budget amendment. We're writing in a proposal that only gives them so much money, and then they can decide how to spend it. And that's one of those tough proposals that we put in there. This leadership is so real. It can happen. It must happen. If it doesn't happen, then we're going to keep getting the kind of leadership we've had, and we're going to get worse and worse results because that's the direction that we're headed in. Let me just say one thing to look at the leadership from a business perspective. Back in the 60s and 70s, actually it was even earlier, because you had Edward Demings back in the 30s and 40s who talked about the management revolution. See, before that, business had mostly been run by professionals who set up, like, a professional law firm or a professional medical firm or a professional accounting firm. And society was run by a professional and maybe a partnership of several professionals, and then they hired people who worked for them. And Demings came along and argued about this, Edward Deming, this idea of we can go to professional management. And so you had the management revolution, where we brought in professional managers. And then fast forward 40 years, we had the leadership revolution, where people like Buckminster Fuller and Stephen Covey and others said, hey, what we need is a leadership revolution. Management's fine, but management is doing things right. We need leadership where you do the right things. Let's have, and so they led a leadership revolution that really, it did revolutionize business, just as the management revolution had changed from just professional firms were the main thing in business to this new model where you had managers and boards and executives and managers of different departments. And then that got revolutionized by the leadership movement, which said, let's do leadership. Let's take leadership far and wide. Today we are facing another revolution, the leadership revolution, another leadership where we say, listen, you can continue to make your business successful as a leader, but if you're making your business successful and the government is regulating it out of existence and regulating freedom and prosperity away, then you can keep, I mean, it's the old cliche of rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. You can be the best leader of the Titanic, the Titanic chair arrangement platoon. You can be so good at it. You can be Fortune 100. You can be the best at it. If the ship sinks, you didn't accomplish much.
Amen.
And so what we've got right now is we've seen a management revolution. We've seen a leadership revolution. We are in desperate need right now of a leadership revolution which says, yeah, I'm going to lead my business. I'm going to continue to make it profitable and successful and make a difference through business. We need a bunch of business leaders who also say, and at the same time, I'm going to use my business experience and wisdom and skill and understanding, and I'm going to help lead this nation. Because, again, we desperately need a leadership. If we don't shift who the leaders are, if business leaders, regular business leaders, don't take their leadership abilities and apply them to what's happening to our freedoms, the Titanic's sinking, and pretty soon it won't matter how good you are in your business.
You know, Tony, why don't you wrap this up and just kind of share from your perspective how the Home Business Radio Network listeners can help?
I appreciate that. You know, and that's exactly what I was thinking as we were moving forward was a few action steps, Orrin. You know, just, what we've, in network marketing and direct sales, for those that are listening to us, you understand, most of you understand the difference between management mode and building mode. I mean, that's what's common. In every company, we talk about that in leadership. And the way the government has become, in my mind, is it's in management mode, totally, you know. And it's only going to fall apart unless we do something about it. And like you said, from the 1913, what happened at that point, those handful of things that happened, how they changed society moving forward, we can't today, in 2013, Oliver and Orrin, we can't today do the same thing that they did back then, which is to stick our fat heads in the sand and go, you know, well, you know what, my latest iPhone 5, it doesn't matter. You know, in other words, we've got to get out of our own narcissistic self and for a moment and realize, even back in World War II, people were more, and I don't mean to get on a rant on this, but people were more in the freedom and more in the, you know, really getting behind, you know, protecting our freedoms. And today we've become more apathetic. You know, apathy is a major issue we have. We've got to wake up and realize that the latest gadget, the latest app, the latest reality show, boo-boo, whatever, I don't know, whatever's out there, doesn't mean anything, you know, without our freedom. Building a network doesn't mean anything without our freedom. So the point is what some of the things I think we can do is it's all in the grassroots. One of the challenges that people have is that they don't think that one person can make a difference. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + 1 is 11. There's a big difference. It's like the synergy between you, Oliver, and Orrin. You guys exponentially have grown in ideas. Look at the difference you're making. So what somebody can do with a handful, a quorum, a small group, you know, quorum, I believe it stands for a small group of people with power. A small group of people with power in any state, in any company, in any entrepreneurial part of society can make a difference, right? And no matter what company you're in, here's one of the first action steps I'd have. Go to Orrin Woodward's blog. He does a very good job, and you do, Oliver. I know you put a lot of input and help Orrin as well, but there's a lot of great information that updates constantly. You need to go to that blog. You need to understand the 5 laws of decline. You need to get the book. I mean, Leadership is an important book. I mean, it's not that expensive. You can afford to go a couple of days without a latte, okay? Come on, get the book. The books that you don't read won't help you. We know that. And then from there, start talking with people. Start sharing some of these ideas. Look for the 10%ers in your companies. Look for the leaders. Who are they? They're the ones doing meetings. They're the ones on the calls. They're the ones going to the regionals. They're the ones at the area events. Go to them and share these concepts with them. They'll pick it up. They'll want to do something about it. And if we do these things, we have the ability to not only have a leadership, because if we don't have a leadership, we're going to have a freedom shift. And it's going to be freedom gone. And that's just my opinion on it. You know, like I said, we're a very positive, happy family here and a big positive, happy show. But I don't know. I want multi-generations of residual income. And without the Titanic being there, like you said, it's a perfect example. The Titanic goes down. The chairs are gone. Nothing we do is going to matter anyway. So at this point, let's do what we can. Let's start moving forward. And with that, I want to thank all of you. Oliver, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your valuable time and your wisdom. You're a walking, talking encyclopedia for freedom, and you are absolutely a person that, you know, it's funny, when things come in life, you know, it's like the people that have it stand up, and you're standing up, and I commend you for that, Orrin. Obviously, that's all you've ever been. I mean, you constantly are fighting. You're constantly fighting for the dream and freedom and people to have a better quality of life, and everything that you do, you stand for is greatness. It's my pleasure to have the opportunity to co-host this show for you. And once again, everybody, this is another phenomenal Google Factory Hangout. This is Tony Cannuli, the host of the co-host of the Google Factory Hangout, Leadership Factory. Have a great week, great month, and please take action today. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week, and God bless.